I'm Esther Medina, and this is Una Conversación. Meet Alex Narvarez, complex Canada host, sneakerhead, trendsetter, and an all-around great guy. This man cannot be put in a box. Always the interviewer, never the interviewee. Today, he lets me take the interview wheel as we sit down and unpack the early beginnings of his creative journey and his current endeavors. Alex! I can't believe this is happening. Una Conversación with Alex Narvaez.
Thank you for
so
having
much
me.
for being here. Thank you. Whenever I see other Latinos doing their thing in the GTA, making noise, setting the tone, I feel like I've also won. So thank you for doing what you do and for putting in the work all these years. For those of you who don't know Alex, he is a media host, personality. But like, to me, that's just like, it doesn't even really properly describe who you are. Like, I feel like you wear so many hats. I also feel like you're infamously known for being from Scarborough, if I may say.
Yeah, for sure. I love Scarborough. I rep Scarborough everywhere I go. So people, if you know me at all, you know that I love Scarborough for sure. There's a few things that I love. I love my Latino people, I love Scarborough, and I love pupusas. If you know me, those are my passions, you know?
Relatable. Listen, being from Scarborough, you know, I want to hear more about that and what it was like.
Yeah, for sure. So my family, I was born in El Salvador, and my family came to Toronto in '86, the same year I was born. Oh. So I was 2 months old when I came to Toronto. Oh. So like, I'm super Canadian. Like I was born over there, but I'm like very, very Canadian. And the first place my family came to was actually Jameson Avenue. That's the first place that the immigrants from El Salvador were landing, was like in those buildings. So if I'm not mistaken, I think it was 100 Jameson was like the first building that my family came to. And that's just kind of where they were putting, you know, the refugees that were coming at the time from El Salvador. So my family came as like refugees from El Salvador because of the war that was happening there. Yeah, after like maybe about a year from being there, it's kind of like a place where they put immigrants coming into Toronto to kind of help you get your footing. And then like they help you get, you know, move around, find housing, a more permanent location. So my family ended up moving to the east. And the first place that we ever went to was a place called Tuxedo Court, which is at Markham and Ellesmere's. It's definitely a place that builds character. It's like a building complex, not luxurious by any means. It was like our first home. It was like our first home in Toronto. And from there, we just moved all around Scarborough. So I've always been in the east my whole life. So for some reason, you probably know this because you're Latina in the city too, but the majority of the Latino population is primarily in the West, right?
And that's where I grew up.
For sure.
My whole life.
It's not to say that there aren't Latinos there's Latinos all over the GTA, all over Canada, but I would say the main concentration is like on the west part, like in the west side of Toronto. So growing up in Scarborough, I didn't grow up with a lot of Latinos at all.
So you were like the standout.
Yeah, like there was, you know, like I said, there was a couple of other Latino kids in different grades and stuff. But in terms of like my direct friends and my direct influences, there wasn't really anybody that I could relate to culturally that I grew up with. Like, you know how Toronto and Canada is very multicultural. So I grew up with a lot of Filipinos, a lot of black kids, a lot of Tamil kids, right? And it wasn't until later when I hit high school that I found like other Latino kids in my high school. So like from anything that was like primary school, it was all just like very multicultural. It wasn't Latin focused at all or Latino focused at all.
Did you have that influence at home at all?
Yeah, for sure.
Like that at home was like home, like.
Yeah, home I spoke Spanish. So like my Spanish is still like pretty decent from years of speaking Spanish at home with my parents and my abuelitas. I was basically raised by my abuela while my parents were at work and stuff. So, you know, my grandma raised me and my sister while my parents were at home or were out working. So I spoke Spanish. My grandma doesn't speak English at all, right? So like my earliest memories of like conversating and stuff are with my sister in English and my my grandmother in Spanish, and then of course at home with my parents, it was like a mix of both, because they're trying to learn English. I'm like, I speak English as a kid, so it was kind of like a mixed bag.
I find this super cool. You and my sister are the same year. I'm the baby in the family, and similar to your family, my parents also came here as refugees. Fast forward, and you know, she's speaking English fluently. My parents are speaking quite fluently. You know, they had to get jobs and learn the language, but I can so relate to like my grandmother not speaking a lick of English. And honestly, I am so grateful for that, because the Spanish that I do know, and which has improved immensely, I will say, but if I didn't have her in my life, like speaking to me, and my grandfather too, like, I don't know, I think I would have lost the ability. And I think that, you know, even now, a lot of like younger kids, like we have second, third generation Salvadorians being born in Canada now. It's like, I always wonder what it will be like when I have my own kids. So I think it's very special that you had that in your home. And
yeah. How's your Spanish?
Bueno, se me nota la gringa, pero ahora me da like more, I have less fear.
Okay,
and
that's good.
I actually did an episode where I did it entirely in Spanish, just to prove to only myself that it's not something that should paralyze me, because for a while it was something that like messed with my head, right? I'm like, oh, I guess I'm not Latina enough if my Spanish is not perfect. But truthfully speaking, after doing that episode, I was like, okay, I'm not lying on my resume. Like, this is great. Like, I am bilingual. Like, it's good. Just sometimes you psych yourself out. So
for sure, I like to hear that, especially as an interviewer myself. Like, you know, it's strange being on this side of the interview, but as someone who asks people a lot of questions, I've also thought about, can I hold like a proper conversation if I was going to sit down with like Bad Bunny?
Yeah.
For instance, could I do it in Spanish? And like the reality is I could, because like I grew up speaking Spanish and I could, but it's not the language that I practice every day. So it's like everything. If you don't practice it every day, it's not going to be as sharp.
You mentioned that you're so used to be the interviewer and not on the other side. And I'm just wondering, like, I'm picturing a young Alex in high school, hanging out with the boys. Like, where did the passion for like connecting with people begin?
I think I've always had it. It's always been like, so this is for people who know my journey. I'm kind of like mixed media. So I do, you know, I've done radio, I've done television production, I've done film production. Anything that's like media related, I've touched in some capacity at some point in my life. So I would say like the origins of that really comes from high school. I was really fortunate that the high school that I went to offered a program that was called Comtech, Communications Technology.
Oh, okay.
And this class was the only class that I felt like I enjoyed. I wasn't a good student by any means. Like, I barely passed high school, but in this one class I excelled so well. So like, imagine, I love telling this story because it's hilarious to me, but it's my graduation night, and I don't know if I'm graduating because my classes.
Oh, you were one of those.
Yeah, I didn't know. There was some classes that I was like barely passing, and at the point of graduation night, like I hadn't, you know, you receive your diploma on that night. So I remember going in to the graduation ceremony, and I asked, you know, one of the principals, I'm like, hey, look, I'm here with my whole family. I don't know if I'm graduating, right? And he's like, really, what's your name? So he like looks it up. He's like, yeah, you're graduating. And I'm like, oh, thank God. Like, I wasn't sure.
But that's so rude. I'm like, not them leaving you on a cliffhanger.
I know, it was a stressful point to not know, but I went and I'm like, I hope I'm graduating, and if not, I'm gonna have to tell my whole family like, yo, I'm not graduating, so we're just going home. But luckily I was graduating. So to my surprise, I graduated, but not only did I graduate, but I graduated with the Comtech award. So everyone that knows me, they're like, this guy is really getting an award? Like, this guy's barely able to like go to class and stuff, but he's getting an award on graduation night. And it was just because that class was the only class I cared about. It's like the class that I went to like make videos and like, I don't know if you remember Flash animation and like all these like the early softwares that were coming out to like make visuals, Photoshop, all that stuff. Like, I was really into that. So the teacher was like, yo, this guy he tries in this class. So I every year I did really well in that class. It was the only class that I did well in. But because of that teacher, shout out Mr. Gilmore,
Mr. Gilmore.
Mr. G. Because of him, I do what I do today, and I'm involved in media because of him, because he opened that door and like showed me that there's a career path here too if you want to do this.
Can you remember work or any like projects you did that you were like proud of at that time? Like what was that looking like back then?
Yeah, there was a few that I was proud of. I mean, we made a music video in that class. I mean, if I look back now, it's super embarrassing, right? Like probably watching that, but yeah, like, I made my first short film in that class. What I felt was, as someone who wasn't regarded as like a good student, it was the first time in an educational setting where I received positive feedback, where there was a teacher that was like, hey Alex, you're really good at this, and like getting good grades. Aside from like gym and like being athletic, it was the only like subject that I felt like, oh, I could actually do this for a living.
Maybe you can tell me what you think. Like, I feel like this is the road less taken, but at the same time, now that I'm in this space, I'm obviously meeting a lot of people who do take this road and who do choose a path in media, whatever that looks like. And I'm just thinking that at that time, it seems like you had the right environment to allow you to flourish and to believe that you can make a career in that. Did you get support at home for what you wanted to do?
Yes and no. I think my family was always interested in you know, me following something that made me happy, but they didn't see practically how media was something that I could survive off of as a career. Through conversations that I had growing up with my family, I think they wanted me to do something more practical, like something in the trades, or try to become a lawyer or a doctor, like the very typical you know, path. And that wasn't a path for me at all. That wasn't something I was interested in or something that I even felt like I could excel in. It wasn't really until later, after university, when I got a job in media, that my parents were like, oh, you can actually do this for a living. So it was a struggle, kind of trying to educate them on how this was a viable path to like have a career, you know?
So the high school then becomes university. Would you say that you went into university like blind about what you wanted to do, or did you have a goal in mind?
That's a good question, because I think at that time I wasn't exactly sure what the path was gonna be, but I still don't know what the path is.
I was like that part. I'm like, I'm not sure that like anyone ever really knows, like when you're in such a creative space, because it's ever changing. Like you have so many passion projects, I feel. I kind of want to hear a little bit more about that. Like off the top of my head, I can think of One Borough, Everyday Lords, Scarborough Maid. How did you know when you wanted to start a project? Like, how did those things come? Are you the type of person to just like act on an idea when it's planted in your head, or do you let it marinate? No,
yeah, I let things sit for a long time. So when something happens, it's very intentional. Like when you see me launch a project, that's like years of thinking and planning. I don't just like jump into a project. I will if it's to support a friend or something, and they're like, hey, can you come help me? Yeah, of course, I'm there. I'll come support you. But something that I'm gonna launch, it's like I try to make it so that when it launches, it has some momentum. But to answer your question, yeah, all of the projects are very different, and that speaks to, again, even what I was thinking when I went to university, when I was in that grade 10 class Comtech. What I'm stimulated by is creating, but I like different mediums. So I don't like to be put into just one box where it's like, so you're a radio host, you're only gonna do radio. Or, you know, you're a creative director, you can only creative direct. I still like to pick up the camera, I'll do photography, I'll do some video, then I'm on the mic, then I'm interviewing people, or I'm creating, you know, big campaigns for companies. It's like, as long as I'm using that muscle, that I'm exercising that creative muscle, that's where I feel happy. That's where I feel the happiest. I'm constantly inspired by your work, not just because I'm someone in this space and like I'm trying to grow in this space, but because I think that from the outside, let me tell you how I feel about the outside looking into what you're doing. Yeah, please. It feels like you've reached a place where you're not afraid to do something new or to experiment with something, but I would like to know if that's true, and I would also like to know, how do you not get overwhelmed at trying new things? It's a good question. I don't know. First of all, I don't think that that's true. I mean, I'm glad that it looks that way, But there's always fear. Like, I don't think that anything good is easy. If something is easy, it doesn't mean that it's bad or that it's not going to be successful. But I think that the things that really bring value don't always necessarily just come easily. Like, it requires some work, it requires thought, it requires sacrifice in some cases to take a project that you feel passionate about and try to get it to the level that you want to get it to. Generally takes some kind of work. And the journey for every project and the goal for every project is different. So it's for sure scary. Every time I launch a project, it's scary. There's always the self-doubt, there's imposter syndrome, there's all those things that I go through every time I'm gonna launch something new, or there's a new interview that I'm doing. You know, before I sit down with a celebrity or something, I'm always like, oh my God, is this gonna go well? What, you know, I have all those thoughts. I think what you learn to do as you progress in your career is you kind of learn how to silence those thoughts, but they're always there. It's just a matter of finding whatever works for you as a creative on like how to turn that part off when it's not necessary. Having fear is good, I think. It makes you care about things. It makes you think about your execution and think about, is this the right way? And when you have a little bit of doubt, to me, that just means you care. It's like, I'm interested in what I'm doing, so I want to put my best foot forward. But there's also the downside of that, where when you listen to that side too much, or you let those thoughts creep in too much, then you're not outputting, and then you're being controlled by fear. And it's like, you got to find that balance.
Yeah.
And learn when to utilize that fear, and when it doesn't serve you, just like let it go.
Spoken like a pro. It just comes from a place of like, it's obvious, like you've had the experience, you've been in the kitchen and gotten burned a few times.
For sure, yeah.
I want to ask you, like, when do you think is the right time to walk away from something? Do you even think there's a right time? And have you ever walked away from something?
You know it's the right time to walk away from a project when it's not serving you anymore. And serving you can look like different things. It could come in different ways. But when you initially start a project, or when you involve yourself in a project, you go in with an intention with a goal. And if somewhere along the lines you find that you're just not getting the output of what you're putting in, that's when you have to, I think, maybe reevaluate. There's projects that I've done that I've started and I've thought to myself, you know what, this is not serving me anymore in the way that I wanted it to, in the way that I set out for it to do. And sometimes that's okay, you can pivot, and sometimes a creative journey evolves into something else, and then you keep it going and you roll with the punches, and it just evolves into something else, and you can keep it going. And there's times where you're like, number one, this isn't making me happy anymore. It's more stressful, it's painful, it's, you know, you start to evaluate. It's like, it's draining my pocket, it's like, it's financially an obligation. It turns into all these things. And I think when you do that, you'll be able to clearly see, this is not serving me anymore. Or there's points where it's like, yes, this is true. It's draining me financially. It's taking a lot of my time. I'm stressed about it, but it's fulfilling, and it's still serving me. It still pushes me. It still makes me hungry to do it again, to do the next project within this realm. Then it's like, it's still doing what it's supposed to do, even if it's hard. So it's not about like it being hard or not hard. It's just more about, is it serving you? And that's kind of when you make that deciding call of like, should I put this to bed or do I keep it going?
This is like almost heavy for me to listen to, because it's just like, you said that so well, and I think that people struggle with putting things to bed because they feel stupid, or they feel like everyone's watching them. Yeah. And it's like, ultimately, you're the only person who's like staring at your own content as much as you do. Like, I've had people tell me, like, even with this podcast, you know, I love doing it, but like sometimes I get in my head about like the drop between each episode, and I even feel like I'm freaking out right now even talking about it out loud, because it feels like, oh my God, now they know. But really and truly, it's like, this is supposed to serve me at the end of the day. This is supposed to be something I love to do, and if others love it too, that's like a bonus. So I really appreciate you like painting that picture and making it more clear for others who are on a similar journey or have taken the risk doing something? Because it's like, sometimes it does, like social media makes things feel like this is life or death. You better never quit. You better never mess up. And it's
true.
It's not always the case.
That's true. But you know what? Social media, the way that I look at social media is it could be really detrimental to someone who looks at everything in a comparison. But it can be it could be a really helpful tool if you look at it for inspiration. I think that honestly, any human that's on social media, you've gone through moments where you're looking at someone else and you're like, damn, like, how come I don't have that? Or there's like a moment of comparison. But it's kind of like what I was saying with fear earlier, where those thoughts will always come. For some reason, by human nature, we're kind of programmed to like compare ourselves to other people. And if you're an ambitious person, you know, someone who wants to do a lot of great things, you're looking at other people who are great, who have done things that you admire. And when you get into a comparison mode, I don't think that that's healthy or helpful.
Yeah.
It's more of like, you know, there's a lot of people that I admire that I follow on socials, but I more look at their work as inspiration. Like I literally draw inspiration from what they're doing. I'm like, that's amazing that that person could do that, you know, and then it'll inspire me to include that in Scarborough Made or in One Borough, or, you know, remix that idea and plug it into an interview or something, right? But it's more about inspiration and drawing inspiration. But you're right, in the era of social media, it can be challenging if you allow all of those voices that are not serving you in. It can become overwhelming.
I love that you mentioned how you differentiate what makes it to Scarborough Made and One Borough. And I really want to put the people listening and watching on. Can you tell me a little bit about how you would describe the two brands?
For sure. So Scarborough Made, as you know, I love Scarborough.
I didn't know that.
It's my passion. You know, I love Scarborough. I love where I'm from. I think the people from Scarborough are, honestly, they're just built different. There's so many great stories that come out of Scarborough. So the whole reason why that project started was because, as I'm sure you've heard in the news, you watch the news and you're like, there's a stabbing in Scarborough. Or there's, you know, this shooting happened in Scarborough. It's like, same as Jane and Finch, and there's other neighborhoods in the city where they are just painted in a light that's not pleasant. So I think as you know, anyone from the GTA, if you hear about Scarborough and you're not from Scarborough, you think about Scarborough in a particular way, the way that you've heard it in the news and stuff. And to me, because I grew up in Scarborough, I'm like, yeah, unfortunately, some of these things exist in Scarborough, but that's not what Scarborough is about. There's like beautiful people in Scarborough, people who are ambitious, hardworking. There's so much determination, there's so much resilience in the people from Scarborough. My friend Sid and I, who are both from Scarborough, we went to university together. There was a point after we graduated where we're like, you know what, now that we're out of school, we should do something for Scarborough. We should do something for our community. And he's a photographer. I'm a creative director, you know, I pick up cameras and do a whole bunch of stuff. So we were like, why don't we create a documentary series where we profile people and great stories that come from Scarborough. And that's really how Scarborough Made started. That was the origin of how it started. And then it evolved. Remember, we were talking about evolution, and is the project serving you? There's a few times where I thought, maybe this is the right time to pull the plug on Scarborough Made and put it to bed. I'm not sure what the next step is, but it continued to evolve. Now it's a mentorship program. We mentor young creatives from Scarborough. Remember, we were talking about my grade 10 class with Mr. Gilmore?
Yes.
I found that was so impactful for me. And I know that not a lot of kids have an opportunity to connect with someone in media at a young age that could kind of show them the ropes. And I'm like, you know what, I should pay it forward. Mr. Gilmore did it for me. I should try to help other kids that are interested in media and give them an entry point into this industry and teach them what I know. So Sid and I created a mentorship program, and Scarborough Made like now mentors young creatives. And we were part of Nuit Blanche, and you know, having these kids create artworks that then get featured on buildings, and you know, it evolved so naturally and organically. You know, Scarborough Made also became a signature project of Toronto in 2019, and it's still going today. We're still in the community. We've done activations with the Toronto Public Library, with the TTC. So it's a project that for me has naturally developed into something I had no idea it would become, and I love it. And One Borough is kind of an extension of Scarborough Made. One Borough is for us. There's so many people that were like, hey, I'm not from Scarborough, but I love what you're doing. How do I get involved? So I was like, you know what? I should start something for the rest of the GTA, for the rest of the world, for whoever wants to be involved in these kind of community activations that's focused around storytelling and just shedding a light on cool things. And that's how One Borough came. So One Borough is still in its infancy stages. It's not as far along as Scarborough Made, but the goal is for it to become a media platform, an agency where we bring young creatives in and we tell stories and we do interviews and we create our own series. That's the future of One Borough. That's where we're headed.
I'm so happy you never gave up on Scarborough Made, because without that you wouldn't have One Borough.
Exactly, yeah.
It didn't happen overnight, you
Yeah.
know. It took the growth of that and the maturing of the first thing for
sure.
the second to come. Also love the direction you're going with from One Borough. I follow your page on Instagram, and
Thank you.
it feels like it was the right time for that to happen. With that in mind, something like Everyday Lords is such a different project, but still an extension of you.
Yeah.
When did you launch that, and what made you think it was the right time to start a clothing brand?
That project is really a joint venture between me and my wife. My wife,
that.
Tiffany Briseño, I'm not just saying this because she's my wife, but she honestly is one of the most talented creatives that I've met as well. And we've kind of always wanted to collaborate on a project together, but again, I don't just rush into things. So we're just like, we've been together for a long time, and we were waiting for the right kind of project. And I could tell you, we didn't think it was gonna be a clothing line for years.
Really?
But we just organically were like, why don't we create a jacket together? It started with one jacket. And Tiff was like, why don't I buy a roll of fabric and stuff? And why don't we just design a cool denim jacket? And I was like, okay, cool. So we designed it. And the jacket, in my opinion, turned out so good. Tiff loved it, I loved it. And I was like, wow, this is a really dope jacket. And then that jacket ended up going on tour with one of Tiff's clients, Andy Grammer. And It was part of his like tour wardrobe. So that's when we were like, you know what? There's something here. We designed something that the world saw. It was on tour with this amazing musician. We should maybe consider doing more of this. And then that one jacket turned into another design collab and another design collab, and then eventually we were like, we should just start a clothing line. Wow. And that's how Everyday Lords came to be. But Tiff is really I'm gonna say like the mastermind designer behind it. I'm more of like creative that just floats in and out, and she's doing all the designs and stuff. But it is a fun collaboration with my wife. Yeah.
I love that you guys found a way to make your worlds collide.
Yeah.
That is my dream. To do something like that with my husband. Not a clothing line. He is a personal trainer. Cool. We will figure it out.
Yeah.
But I love that you guys found a way to.
You create a pupusa diet. All right, so you eat pupusa. There's like a special workout, how to burn the manteca.
How can we make pupusas 0 calories?
There you go.
I love your origin story when it comes to Everyday Lords, but I don't think that Everyday Lords was the beginning of your fashion story. And I actually have some cards here.
Oh my God! I hope there's no like embarrassing.
I wanna take you back. Let's do a little style flashback.
Yeah, let's do it. Okay, what do we got here? This is.
You know what? I've done a few of these, and I always like to do something creative at the end of my episodes, but I'm like, man, like you have had too many eras of drip to not go back and force you to react and explain to us what was going on.
Okay, let's do it.
Similar to what you may have seen on the internet with celebrities reacting to previous award show looks that they had, I have this collection.
Wow.
So if you will, please share with us what was.
Okay, so this is a very interesting point in my radio journey, I'll call it. So here, as you can see, I'm wearing a Big Pun t-shirt, and I have the Snoop Dogg, braids. So this is like the beginning of my radio career. This is I believe this is CKLN 88.1, and the inspiration for me at this point was just hip hop. I was a hip hop kid, and as you can see, I really wanted to showcase this through my style. And I think that this t-shirt, if I'm not mistaken, is like a 4X t-shirt. So it was
not big enough.
It was like a dress, you know. Yeah, it's a very interesting fashion choice at this point in my life. Okay, next. Wow. Okay, so this is a very interesting fashion choice as well. So this is me and Snoop Dogg. This was actually shot in LA. So we're actually at the CBS studio here. And at the time I was working with George Strombolopoulos. Strombo's a huge inspiration in my career. I love Strombo. A big reason why I do interviews and stuff like this is because of my inspiration from George.
No
Watching him do
way.
interviews, and I worked with him. I worked with George for like a decade. George was actually at the CBS station in LA filming his season of Strombolopoulos that went on CNN. So I was down there with him and some of the other crew, and Snoop Dogg was one of his guests. So this is actually like, you're bringing me back, and I'm
That's
like, wow.
wild.
I remember thinking, I'm gonna show up in this cool suit. And the funny story about this is a lot of people are like, yo, how did you get that picture with Snoop? But because I showed up in a suit, Snoop was like, yo, you're looking fresh, bro. And I was like, oh, thanks, man. He's like, yo, come, let's get a picture, bro. Snoop actually asked me to take the picture, not knowing who I was. He just kind of liked the drip, and I was like, of course, I'll oblige. So that fashion statement actually got me this picture with Snoop, which is really cool.
I am never leaving the house without being in a suit ever again.
So this next one, this is at Paris Fashion Week.
No way.
Yeah, so this was taken in Paris. I felt like I needed to dress the part. So I pulled out the boots. People know me for sneakers, you know, but I was like, you know what? I'm gonna pull out the boots for this one. And I was with my wife Tiff, so we actually hit a few fashion shows. And I just felt like I gotta pull out the trench. I did the double trench this day, and I just felt like I needed to fit that Parisian vibe. This is my Paris look. And this one, so this is a more recent, I would say this is kind of like a chill. This is like what you catch me in daily, maybe.
This is you now?
I think they're all me now. I'll still do all of these. Minus maybe this one. Minus this one. I think I could still do a lot of these. And this is like my day-to-day. I'm running errands, like I'm gonna go do stuff. Very comfortable. Similar to what I'm kind of wearing
I know,
now.
I was just gonna say, I'm like, it's giving today's look.
Yeah. Thank you for presenting me with these. This one is hilarious to me.
This one is hilarious that you said Snoop Dogg here, and then the next photo, unplanned, was literally you and Snoop Dogg. Like, I can't.
The inspiration was there.
I have loved hearing about your story and getting to know a little bit more about where you're from, because it's one thing to watch you do all this incredible work, but it's another thing to get to know the person behind the work. And, you know, I really want to thank you for coming here today and sharing your stories with me and my audience. And I would love for you to share where they can find you. Please shamelessly plug away.
For sure. And also, thank you for having me. I really appreciate this. When you invited me on the show, I was like, of course I'll come. Like, I wanted to connect with you. I also love what you're doing. I saw your interview with my brother, you know, Carlos from Toronto Latinos, and I was like, yeah, man, of course. Like, I want to come and support. So I also want to show you love and say I really appreciate what you're doing for the community as well. And I wish you nothing but success. I want to see more of these, and hopefully I'll be back on again at some point later.
The reunion episode.
For sure. In terms of what I have coming up, One Borough, if you follow at oneborough.world on Instagram or any socials, that's where we have all the stuff always bubbling up, at Scarborough Made on all the socials. If you want to support our project from the East End, we'd love to have the support. And you can find me on Complex. I'm on Complex Canada. I do a lot of the interviews and a lot of the production stuff. So if you're into Complex, sneaker culture, music culture, go to Complex Canada. And you'll find me as, one of the main hosts there.
I love it. So you never have to miss out on what Alex is doing again. Alex, thank you again for being here.
For sure.
And thank you all for tuning in and watching this episode of Una Conversación. Don't forget to subscribe and follow Alex. I'll see you in the next one.
Peace.